The federal government is pressuring New York City to take down signs around Times Square saying technically Times Square is a federal highway. This is how out of control our government has become and how disconnected from common sense it is. Jay Sekulow is with us. His new book is Undemocratic. Hello, Jay.
Hi, Glenn. And I'm a couple of blocks from Times Square in a hotel right now, and you're absolutely right. The feds are taking the view that under the Highway Beautification Act, that in fact the Times Square area, which has been known to be this brightly lit area for decades and decades, it's an icon of New York City, should be regulated under the Beautification Act from the highways from the 1960s. That's the latest bureaucratic move in the United States.
Well, first of all, why? For the love of God, we are on fire. Wow. Why are they worried about the signs in Times Square?
Because, Glenn, what we have and what we've seen now is, and you've been talking about this for a decade, you've got an unelected branch of government, these bureaucrats. And when you have the bureaucrats in lockstep with a friendly administration, they will do stupid things. Stupid like having the Highway Beautification Act apply to and be applied to Times Square in particular, not impacting, by the way, not even thinking about the impact economically that will have on New York City, but rather just taking a bureaucratic agenda, moving it through. They're accountable to no one. They're elected by no one. Meanwhile, they're interfering with, right now, it's basically the right to commerce in Manhattan, in the heart of Manhattan, at the iconic symbol of Manhattan, Times Square. So this is this bureaucracy that has become more powerful than the president, more powerful than the Supreme Court, more powerful than the Congress. They pass more rules and regulations than the Congress, and they're accountable to nobody. Yeah. And that's the biggest problem, and we've got to take it back.
So hang on just a second. They're saying that this was under the Highway Act because it's some sort of a federal highway, but they closed part of it for bikes like 3 years ago. What highway has bikes?
No highway has bikes, but what they've done is they determined that because coming off of and into Times Square, you are coming off of some types of interstate or some types of road that go through interstate commerce. Therefore, under the Commerce Clause, they have authority, and that's the position they're taking.
Every road comes off of a federal highway. I mean, you could do that in every town in America. You come off I-5 and you turn on, I don't even know, Santa Monica Boulevard. Is that now a federal highway too, and they can regulate that?
The Department of Transportation, the unfortunate...
We're losing you, Jay. We're losing you.
He's been regulated out of existence.
Oh, my gosh, they got to him.
They did.
Are you there, Jay?
No, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so what you've got is exactly what you said, Glenn. They are taking the position that the government reach is so broad that they can enter into a municipality and regulate the roads of New York City as if it was a federal interstate highway. That's how they do it.
Okay. Your book is infuriating. If it wasn't for the ending, it would be infuriating because we all know these things. We don't know how bad it is. For instance, in your book, you talk about, the IRS has promoted employees who have cheated on their taxes, and they've received promotions.
While they were auditing adoptive parents, the IRS determined a few years back to audit every parent in the United States that took an adoption tax credit. Now, this was while all the big business stuff was going on. The IRS was targeting. We heard about the Tea Party targeting the conservative groups, the patriotic groups, but they were also targeting adoptive parents to see if they violated the adoption tax credit, and an entire bureaucracy within the IRS was dedicated to that task. That's how deep this problem is. And they're accountable, as you said, Glenn, to nobody. They don't get fired. They don't get reviewed. In fact, they get promoted.
So, Jay, honestly, the more we go down this road, the worse our country has become, the more I don't recognize it, the more we were just talking before we went on the air today, and we want to talk about this later on. How much would it cost to give up your citizenship? And Pat was surprising. Pat was like, $5 million, I'm gone. And that was like
the way it is now. Yeah,
I know that,
because
but you would have never said that.
No,
you would have.
no
10
way.
years ago, 15 years ago, you would have never ever considered that.
6 years and 97 days ago, I wouldn't.
Right.
have.
So, I mean, we're in a real mess. How do we fix this, Jay?
Number one, this bureaucracy, Glenn, has transcended Republicans and Democrats. And I know you've been equally critical of both, as you should be. It's transcended both political parties. It's transcended the presidency. The fact it's more powerful than the presidency. The first thing, though, is an easy fix. You know what you do? You hold these government agents accountable. So when you go to court and they're charged with violating someone's civil rights, and the court says, yes, you violated their civil rights, but because you're a government employee, you're immune from prosecution, you're immune from damages, end that. So they should be on the same rules and play by the same rules and regulations as we play by. You do something wrong, you're held accountable, period. That means you could lose your job, you could be subject to damages. Number two, some agencies are beyond reformation. So you got to, when the government does something wrong.
Which ones?
The IRS, clearly. And the Internal Revenue Service, I was an IRS lawyer right out of law school. It was my first job. They are incapable of self-correcting. They are incapable of fixing their internal problems. You got to scrap the tax code, and you got to start all over again. And it's not that complicated. It's been done, can be done, it should be done. That's number one. Number two, you take an agency that I know breaks your heart, it breaks my heart. The Federal Veterans Affairs. Now, the VA no one got fired over the VA scandal. Jeez. One guy quit. What they've done to our veterans who have served to protect you and me and our families is a scandal. Not on the media anymore because the media is on other things. But what do you have to do with the VA? Either privatize it, make it accountable. You know what?
Wait. You're breaking up. No. I've never wanted to hear an interview more than this, and you're breaking up. So what do we do to
Sorry
the
about
VA?
That. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. What do you do to the VA?
Get rid of it. I think privatize it is what you do. You privatize the Veterans Administration. That's the key.
But can I tell you something?
We
already have, like, the Carrick Brain Center. Every time I go there are tons of veterans there that are getting help for the very first time. And you still have all of the red tape. The VA, doesn't want to give them any money. They're a private organization. You'll still have all of the red tape of all of the garbage that comes from Washington, where literally – one of my friends, he lost his leg in Iraq. He had to have an X-ray after 4 prosthetics were made for him over a 5 or 6 year period. He had to have an X-ray of his missing leg to prove to the VA that he didn't have a leg. What do you?
Well, this is the biggest part of the problem. The cover of the book is the sexual liberty and red tape. So what you got to cut the red tape. You talk about the VA situation and the work you're doing with private contributions, private funding. We have to encourage that. We got to get the government out of the way so that the charitable organizations can get the aid to those in need, especially within the VA context, and not allow the bureaucracy to squelch private enterprise or private initiatives. And when I think it can happen,
how do you get the private?
You got to resist.
How do you get the? Okay, so let's talk about that. You resist. They'll squash the average person if you resist.
Yep.
What does the average person do? How? I'm willing to resist, but I'm not willing to stand there all by myself and resist, and then just go to prison and nobody ever hears from me again. How do you resist?
When you're talking on the microphone right now, you're talking to millions of people. It's going to take. It is an effort that we have in this country under the First Amendment of freedom of association, and that is exactly what this is. We collectively, as the American people, have to simply say no. And you know what happens oftentimes when the government says you say no to the government? Oftentimes they.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hang on, Jay, hang on. We got to get you on a hard line or something. This is driving me out of my mind because I really want to hear what you're saying. So let me call you back. We're going to put you on hold, get a number where we can call him back on a hard line, and I'm going to stop and do a quick commercial break. So we're having kind of a problem because Jay Sekulow is staying at Times Square, and they won't connect us to his room.
That's because it's a beautiful highway, and there's
Right,
too many signs on the highway there.
So
And,
we're hoping that he's going to call us back because we can't get connected to his
He's
room.
apparently staying under an alias, which I don't know if Jay Sekulow realizes this, but he's not Brad Pitt. Does not need to stay under an alias.
No, here's what's interesting.
I always look for Jay Sekulow.
Can I tell you something?
hotels.
Can I tell you something? This is true.
Yeah.
When I stay at a hotel, I stay under Jay Sekulow.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's just drawing
That's the
unwarranted
alien.
attention.
You've been bothered how many times?
Never. Never. Yeah. Never. I've never been bothered. I stay under Jay Sekulow. So now I got to change the name.
Man.
You know, I might have to stay under Stephen King or something like that. But,
Nobody would find you that.
I know. He's got an alias.
That's pretty cool. Is the Jay Sekulow life that good? I didn't realize.
must be.
Either that, or he's
We
like
live in the
talking
high
to
life.
us and then hooking up with his, hooker or something.
I don't think it's not Anthony Weiner's alias. It's
I don't know. It's a little strange, but Jay hopefully will be joining us.
The Sekulow fact of the federal government pressuring New York City to take down signs at Times Square, can that be real? Is that some
No,
sort
he made it up.
No, I mean, is it a government snafu? Did they just send a notice to the wrong address or something?
Here he's back on. Jay.
Yes, sir. Hope this is better.
This
Oh
is much better. It's much better. So we're just talking about, is this a government snafu with the Times Square thing? Are they really trying to shut those down?
I would assume not. I don't think we have the luxury, Glenn, of assuming any of these government actions are snafus or unintentional. I believe that what the government has decided is that they're going to target, in this particular case, New York City, Times Square, the icon of Manhattan, for this application of the Highway Act. Why? Because they believe that it's somehow going to serve the betterment of mankind. And that's how they view all of these things. And it becomes especially dangerous when you have a bureaucracy class that is in lockstep with the president, because together that collusion is the most powerful branch of government, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And you're talking about an economic icon of Manhattan being impacted by a misuse of a regulation, which is what the government's known for here.
Jay, how concerned are you for our nation at this point?
You know, Glenn, I just became a grandfather a couple of years ago, so I've just now gotten a grandfather. And the fact is, I am more concerned for our country now than I have ever been. I believe that right now we are probably at the most dangerous point in our constitutional republic that we've been in at least 100 years, and a choice has to be made. Do we accept it and just see what happens, which would be unbelievably dangerous, or do we go ahead and fight back, which I believe is our only option? And the fighting back takes a variety of positions, and one of those positions is you've got, as I say in the book, you resist, you reform, and then you restore. But it's going to take as I mentioned earlier, we've got it's got to be a collective effort. One person by themselves doesn't get to do this. But look, they shut down the Tea Party movement through a misuse of the IRS, just as that movement was really gaining a footing. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that this is going to be a real challenge. But the first thing we have to be aware of is what's wrong with the country, what's wrong with the republic, the way we have it set up. And that's the problem. That's these agencies and these bureaucracies completely out of control.
So wait a minute. Are you talking, what kind of resisting are you talking about? Give me an example of what we should do.
I'll give you a perfect example of a real case I had. We had a case where we represented a large business that was challenging the Obamacare mandate, the HHS mandate. Remember, that was a couple years ago. We ended up winning, but we went to court for this large company. They simultaneously, with the filing of a lawsuit, they get audited by the IRS. They get audited. We go through the audit. Their accountants do it. No changes, no modifications. Everything's fine. We win the case at the Supreme Court of the United States. The IRS, within a month, sends out another letter. Within a month of them just closing the IRS case out, sends out another letter saying we are auditing you now for additional years. One of my law partners called me, Glenn, and said, what should we do? And I said, just tell them no. And you know what happened? The IRS folded because they don't want to be on Glenn Beck's program, and they don't want to be being sued again, because we sue them when they do these things, and being held accountable. So that's part of this, that's the resisting. But we also get rid of these exemptions that these government agencies and these bureaucrats get, where they do anything they want and are never held accountable. You cannot fire them. You cannot sue them. They cannot be held liable. We've got to remove that immunity, and that is a statutory fix that's not that complicated. We just have got to get Republicans and should be Democrats, too, with a backbone to actually do it.
Okay, so but tell me, like, there was this guy that was just in the blaze last week that just had like a small like convenience store in one of the Carolinas, and he sold like bait and he was the IRS came in and took $100,000 of his money and just held it. You know the story? So what is it?
$105,000 actually.
So
and it got a lot of national attention, mostly because of the blaze. And you know what happened? The IRS gave the money back. That's where you are resisting. People, sometimes it's a megaphone, like your broadcasts and the blaze. Sometimes it's legal action. So in his particular case, it was both. It was the notification that the IRS was put on notice that the entire country is going to be hearing about this, which they did, and then the legal maneuvers that the IRS cannot just do this, grab money out of a guy's account with no notice, simply because the IRS thought that was the best thing to handle something they suspected there was a tax liability. They couldn't even prove it, and ultimately, obviously, they could not. But they caved, and that's the key thing here. They will cave.
So I was reading a book from somebody else the other day, and they were talking about they think that we need to find a bunch of millionaires and billionaires who will say, when they see these stories, they just put it in a giant fund. I'm going to donate $1 million to this. And then they get people like you who always tap into that fund. So when something happens, we have a fund that's all paid for that can go and fight all of these things.
I think personally that is a great idea, because when you have the collective effort, basically a constitutional republic defense fund, and that's one of the things we outline in the book, actually, is this idea of collectively working together on these issues. And you've done a fantastic job of this, Glenn. But it's a great idea. You get people's resources combined so that we don't put up with the abuse. And ultimately, they fold. The government will fold if the pressure is extensive enough and it's unrelenting. But I underscore unrelenting. You cannot light up for a minute. Not one moment can you take a deep breath. You have to continue to push them and push them hard.
When do you think is there a sign that you look for and say we're too far gone?
I was very concerned with the IRS situation, as you can imagine. As a former IRS prosecutor years ago, I never had this kind of experience. Then I had to defend it. That had me very much concerned. I mentioned the VA situation is outrageous, and as you mentioned, the work you're doing and the bureaucrats in the way. The National Labor Relations Board trying to shut down the economic growth of South Carolina by not allowing Boeing to relocate or to build a plant in South Carolina, which would have cost no jobs on the West Coast, but still fought it. A president that overreaches at every moment he can with executive action. Okay. So I think we're at the tipping point. I think we're there. I don't think this is the book Undemocratic is not a prediction. We're there. How do we fix it?
It's available in bookstores everywhere. Undemocratic. Buy it now. Make a difference.
The Glenn Beck Program.
The Blaze Radio Network.